Hare Krishna. So last week, Ghanshyam Prabhu, he discussed from the end of chapter 10 of 11th canto some of the questions that Uddhava was asking to Krishna. And then last week we also saw Ghanshyam Prabhu was discussing from the start of chapter 11 of 11th canto the symptoms of the living entities. And this week we'll continue on with that chapter. And before we continue, we'll recite the verses, the key verses Prabhu has given us. Konu rajan indriyavan mukunda charanam bhujam na bhajet sarvato mrityur upasyam amarotame bhajanti ye yata devan deva api tatevatan chayeva karma sachiva sadhavo dinavatsalaha dullabho manuso deho dehinam shanabanguraha tatrapi dullabham manye vaikunta priyadarshanam Yanastaya naro rajan na pramajyeta karichit dhavan nimilya vanetre na skale na pated iha bhayam dutiya bhinivesatashat isa dapetasya viparyayo smiti tanmayayato buddha abhajatam bhaktye kayesam gurudevatatma Bhakti parisanu bhavo viraktir anyatra chesa trika eka kala prapajyamanasya yatasnatashus tusti pushti shudapayo anugasam Shiha viruvacha sarva bhutesu yapasyed bhagavad bhavamatmanaha bhutani bhagavati atmani esa bhagavatotama Ishvare tada dineshu balisesu disatsu cha prema maitri kripopeksha yakaroti samajjama acharyam eva haraye pujam ya shradaye hate natad bhaktesu chanyesu sabhakta prakritasmita Tasmad gurum prapajyeta jignasu shreya uttamam shabde parecha nishnatam brahmani upasamashrayam sarvato manaso sangam adau sangam cha sadhusu dayam maitrim prashrayam cha bhutesu adayatochatam parasparanu kathanam pavanam bhagavad yasaha mitoratir mitastustir nivritir mita atmanaha. So this week, today we will discuss from the second page of the slokas, Canto 11, Chapter 2, text number 37, the famous verse, Bhayam Dutiya Bhini Viseta Shat, which is talking about fear, how fear comes about, and how one can overcome fear. So this is on the second page of the sheet. So it's 11 to 37. I'll read the translation. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. This bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potency for illusion called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity, and as his very life and soul. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksul Mritam Yena Tasmei Shri Gurave Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda. So, would you mind sitting straight? Okay, so in this verse, which is a very famous verse that we will see Prabhupada often quoting in his purports. Prabhupada will usually quote the first line of this verse, Bhayam Dutiya Bhini Vesatashyad. And in CC, this verse is also quoted many times. And this verse is explaining how does fear actually come about. Fear comes about, this verse explains, when we misidentify ourselves, being overcome by the illusory energy of Lord, Maya, we misidentify ourselves with the material body. And when that happens, when one gets overcome by illusion, what happens? In the second line of this verse, it says, Viparyayo Smriti. So Viparyayo means, in Sanskrit, Prabhupada translates, Prabhupada would translate this verse differently, slightly differently in CC and in Bhagavatam. In CC, Prabhupada translates Viparyayo Smriti means reversal, that one's Smriti or one's conception of himself gets completely reversed or switched around. And in this purport, Prabhupada explains that our actual identity or actual conception of life, it should be that we are Krishna's servant. But when one comes to his mature world and one gets overcome by illusion, then Viparyayo Smriti, one's conception of life becomes reversed. And instead of thinking as oneself as Krishna's servant, one starts thinking oneself as Krishna's competitor. And one starts competing with Krishna, trying to enjoy himself, trying to be the controller and the master and lord it over mature nature. And due to this, all suffering, all miseries, and all fear comes about. Due to us forgetting ourselves as servants of Krishna and us trying to compete with Krishna. So this is the root cause of all fears, this verse explains. And how to get out of it, the second part of the verse, first half of the verse, it gives the problem, which is fear, and how it comes about. It comes about due to us going into Maya and forgetting ourselves as Krishna's servant and instead being a competitor to Krishna. What is the solution? How can we get out? The second half of the verse explains, Tan Maya Yato Buddha Abhajetam Bhaktye Kayesam Guru Devatatma. So the second half of the verse explains that therefore an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, whom he should accept as his worshipable deity and as his very life and soul. So the way to get out of fear is to take shelter of Guru, and by taking shelter of Guru, one should take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. Just like in that famous bhajan, which is like a prayer to the mind, Bhajo Hure Mana, Sri Nanda Nandana, Abhaya Charanara Vindare. So Abhaya Charananda Vindaya means that by taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, one can become completely fearless. How is it one can become fearless? By taking shelter of Krishna's feet. In the same 11th canto, there's a famous verse by Uddhava. He explains that Tasmad Bhavantam Anavajam Anantaparam Nirvittadi Sarvagya Ishvara Akuntam Vikunta Disham. So he explains that we should all take shelter of Krishna because firstly, Krishna is Anavajam. Anavajam means that Krishna, he has no discrepancies in his personal character. Ordinarily speaking, people around us, they have some good qualities, but they also have some faults, some areas in their life where they have some kind of faults. But Krishna is that person who has no faults in his personal character, so therefore he is the most reliable person to take shelter of. Anavajam, then Anantaparam. Anantaparam means that Krishna is not limited by time and space. The persons around us, they can't be there physically present with us 24 hours a day for our whole life. What to speak of this life, what about our next lives? They can't be present with us. Only a limited time during the day, they can be present with us and they can give us shelter from fear or danger. But Krishna, because he is Anantaparam, he is not limited by time and space, 24 hours a day at all times, places and circumstances. Shri Radha Gopinath, they're personally present with us. So therefore, again Uddhava says, we should take shelter of Krishna. And Sarvagya. Sarvagya means that Krishna is all-knowing. So he knows exactly what's going in our mind. He knows exactly what fear is going in our mind, what distress, anxiety, stress. And so he knows how to take care of us. And Ishvara. Ishvara means that Krishna is the supreme controller. So again, Uddhava explains, because Krishna is the supreme controller, that's why we should take shelter of his lotus feet, because he's the boss, he's maintaining this whole universe. Any problem that comes, no matter how big it is, because Krishna is Ishvara, he's the supreme controller, he can give us full protection. So in this way, Uddhava explains in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam why one should take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, how one becomes fearless by taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. So this verse explaining that as long as we're in Krishna consciousness, as long as we're remembering Shri Radha Gopinath, understanding that they're present with us in our hearts, then fear cannot overcome us. Abhaya Charanara Vindaya. By taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, one becomes completely fearless. And I was reading something recently in regard to fear. In the 9th canto Bhagavatam, King Nabhi, he gives an example of how everyone in this universe, they're all overcome by fear, just like he gives the example of a fish. And this is in the context in 9th canto. It's explained that Nabhi, he was a great king, and his priest or his family priest was Vasistha. And he wanted to do some yagna or sacrifice for the pleasure of Vishnu. And so he asked his family priest Vasistha to come and manage or take charge of doing the sacrifice. But Vasistha says, I can't do the sacrifice for you now. At this moment, Indra is calling me to do another sacrifice, so I have to attend to Indra first, and then I'll come and do the sacrifice for you. So Vasistha, he doesn't agree. He says, wait for some time. After I do Indra's sacrifice, I'll come. And at this time, Nabhi, he's thinking to himself, he's a pure devotee of the Lord, and Nabhi is thinking to himself that this human form of life is so short. At any point in time, I can die, I can pass away. I don't want to waste a single moment. I can't wait for Vasistha to come and do the sacrifice. Let me do this immediately. So instead, he gets some other sages or brahmanas to do the sacrifice for him. So his motive was pure. His motive was just to satisfy the lordships, and he's following the instruction of Shastras. Shastras explain that this human form of life is very rare. Only after so many millions and millions of life does one actually attain the human form of life. And we don't know, at any moment we can pass away. So therefore one shouldn't waste a single moment. In that, again, that famous song, Bhaja Hure Mana Shri Nanda Nandana, the author of this poem, he gives an example that this human form of life is just like a drop of water on the leaf of a lotus. So just if we go to our Cessnock farm, they have a little small pond with a lotus flower, with some lotus flowers. And if you see, the nature of the lotus flower, the leaves of the lotus flower is such that if any water goes onto that leaf, immediately that water will come off and again come back into the pond. So just like a drop of water on the lotus leaf, there's no stability. Any second, the water can slip out and fall back down. So in the same way, the author of this famous poem, Bhaja Hure Mana, he explains that our human form of life is just like this. At any moment, death can come and take away. And this super rare opportunity of human form of life can be taken away from us. So Nabhi, he was thinking like this, that, this human form of life is so rare, I don't want to waste a single moment. Let me do this sacrifice without Vasistha. So he does the sacrifice, and then Vasistha, after doing the Indra puja, he comes and he sees that his disciple has already done the yagna without him. And at this time, Vasistha, he becomes immediately angry and furious, and he curses his disciple, Maharaj Nabhi, that because you couldn't wait for me, you did the sacrifice on your own, I curse you that you will die, that you will give up your body. And Prabhupada, in the purport, he explains that actually Vasistha, he was wrong in cursing, giving this curse to Maharaj Nabhi. Maharaj Nabhi hadn't done anything wrong. He was simply doing whatever he was doing was out of pure devotional service. And actually on the other side, Vasistha, he was at fault. Prabhupada explains that Vasistha, the whole reason he went to do the yagna for Indra was that he could get more money or more, when the brahmanas, they would do some particular yagna for the king, they will get some charity in return. So Prabhupada explained that Vasistha's mindset was such that he was thinking, if I go and do the Indra yagna first, I'll get more remuneration, I'll get more wealth. And so that was his material motive. So actually Vasistha was at fault, and Nabhi was faultless. But still Vasistha is cursing his disciple Nabhi. And Prabhupada makes this point that whenever a living entity, he goes against his duty or against his dharma or against devotional service, at that time he will immediately lose not just material power but spiritual power also. This is a result, Prabhupada explains, when we do a particular action that's sinful, which is against our dharma, one will lose all of his material powers, and one will also start losing all of his spiritual power. And that's what happens to Vasistha. Nabhi also in turn, he curses Vasistha, and then Vasistha again, he also gives up his body, and then Vasistha is born again through the semen of Varuna and another rishi called, I think, Mitra. So, and then Nabhi, he gives up his body because he's also cursed. And at that time, the sages in that yagna, they prayed to the demigods that please, Nabhi was faultless, please bring Nabhi back to life. And the demigods, they bring Nabhi back, And at this time, Nabhi is explaining to the demigods and the sages that please don't force me to take another material body. And Nabhi explains that this material body, no matter wherever it is situated in this world, in any one of the 14 planetary systems, wherever we go in this material world, whichever material body we get, there's always 3 symptoms of any material body. One is Soka, Bhaya, and Moha. No matter whichever body we get, either in the heavenly planets, middle planetary systems, or lower planetary systems, that material body we accept will be the cause of fear for us, will be the cause of lamentation, and will be the cause of illusion for us. And then Nabhi, he goes on to explain that life in this material world can be compared to a fish in water. And Nabhi explains, just like if you go to the aquarium or if you see a fish tank, you see the fish will always be looking here and there in fear. Like one time the fish will be looking this way, then immediately he'll turn that way, then this way, this way. The eyes of the fish will always be moving here and there. And why is the fish so agitated? Why is the fish always looking here and there, immediately changing direction? Nabhi explains that just like the fish in water is always in anxiety of death. Nabhi explains the fish in the water at all times, he is always overcome by this fear or this anxiety that any time a big fish can come and swallow me. And this constant fear is constantly going on in the mind of the fish. That's why the fish is always looking here and there if you observe in a fish tank. Same thing we can observe with pigeons. You see there's many pigeons, they'll come to our temple. And if you observe them, you see their eyes are always going here and there. There'll be some food they'll be eating, but while they're eating, they'll be eating and then also looking to the side. And what are they looking at? Prabhupada explains, they're looking to see if there's any danger coming. So just like Nabhi explained, just like a fish in water is in constant anxiety of death. At any time death can come, or a big fish can come and his life can be finished. Or just like pigeons, they're always in fear of death, of some big creature coming and harming them. In the same way Nabhi explains, no matter whichever material body we get in any part of the universe, even in the heavenly planets, even the body of Brahma, this fear or anxiety of death will always be there. Therefore Nabhi says, please don't force me to come back into another material body. I'm satisfied as it is, as I am. So in this way Nabhi, he refuses to come. So in this way, this is a nice example Nabhi, he gives of our position in this material world. That constantly we're overcome by fear. But for one who is always remembering the lotus feet of their lordships and who understands that Krishna is within my heart as Paramatma, for him, he is fearless. So, okay, so that's that verse 11 to 37. Now we'll continue on from where we left off last week. So, last week, Ghanshyam Prabhu, he discussed from the end of chapter 10 of 11th canto. And if you take out your summary sheets, we'll see that at the end of chapter 10 of 11th canto, Uddhava, he puts forward 2 questions towards Krishna. Question number 1, we saw, he asked Krishna that how is it that the jiva, he becomes bound up in all of these fruitive activities. And the second question he asks is, what are the symptoms by which I can distinguish Nitya Siddha from a Nitya Baddha? So last week Ghanshyam Prabhu is describing, okay, there's the Nitya Siddhas and then there's the Nitya Baddhas. And the way we can understand simply the difference between Nitya Siddhas and Nitya Baddhas are, Nitya Siddhas, they're eternally liberated, and Nitya Baddhas are those who fall down once. Once they fall down, but after falling down once, they also become liberated by taking to devotional service. And because they once burnt, twice shy, then they don't fall down anymore. So Uddhava is asking, how can I distinguish who is a Nitya Siddha and who is a Nitya Baddha? What are the symptoms? So these are the 2 questions he asks at the end of the last chapter. Now in this chapter which we're reading from, we started reading from last week, chapter 11, the symptoms of living entities. Krishna will discuss a few different things. In the summary sheets explain that first he'll explain how the spiritual soul is never actually entangled in the material energy, and about how the cause of bondage is ignorance or avidya. And then Krishna will explain the difference between conditioned soul and liberated soul, the path of karma, jnana, and then finally devotional service in the association of devotees. So last week we covered 6 verses of this chapter. We'll continue from text 7. So this is 11th canto, chapter 11, text number 7. And we'll see how much we can cover today. Okay, text number 7. The bird who does not eat the fruits of the tree is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who by his omniscience perfectly understands his own position and that of the conditioned living entity, represented by the eating bird. The living entity, on the other hand, does not understand himself or the Lord. He is covered by ignorance and is thus called eternally conditioned, whereas the Personality of Godhead, being full of perfect knowledge, is eternally liberated. So a very common, famous analogy we've all heard about how there's two birds on the tree. One is the eating bird and one is the observing bird, which is Paramatma. Paramatma doesn't engage, he just stands aloof and just watches and witnesses, waiting for the conditioned soul to turn his face towards him. And the last line of this verse, it's explained, the living entity, on the other hand, does not understand himself or the Lord. He is covered by ignorance and is thus called eternally conditioned, whereas the Personality of Godhead, being full of perfect knowledge, is eternally liberated. So if you remember the two questions Uddhava has asked, one is that how is it that the living entity is bound up in all this fruitive work, how is it bound up in this material world? And the second question was, what is the symptoms of an eternally liberated soul? So in this verse, Krishna is explaining the cause of bondage for the living entity is due to avidya, or due to ignorance. Because of this quality of avidya, or ignorance, the living entity, Krishna explains, he firstly doesn't understand himself, and he also doesn't understand Krishna. Prabhupada explains that it's just like if we go into a room and the room is pitch black or pitch dark. If you go to a completely dark room, then if you close your eyes and you imagine yourself in a dark room, we can't see ourselves because everything is completely dark, and you can't see all the persons around you also because of the darkness. And you can't see the different objects. What are the different objects in the room? Everything is just dark. One has no idea of how he looks. One has no idea of how others look or what other living entities are in that room. And even the different objects in that room, one can't see also. So in the same way, Prabhupada explains that when one comes into this material world, he gets overcome by avidya or ignorance. And because of this disease of avidya, one can't see himself, and therefore one misidentifies himself with the material body. And one can't see Krishna also. How Krishna is there, present with us in our hearts as our best friend, as our most loving father. And also one can't see other different objects in the room. So the other objects and items in the room, that's compared to the material world or the material energy. And one starts misthinking that this material energy, these material objects are all meant for my pleasure, my sense gratification. So the way to get out of this is someone just comes and switches on the light switch. Just by that, turning on that one switch, the whole room is illuminated. And once the room is illuminated, Prabhupada explains, then we can see ourselves. Okay, this is who I am. Okay, I am the servant of Krishna. Then one can see Krishna from, okay, so this is Krishna, the Supreme Lord. I'm supposed to worship him. And then one can see all the different things in the room and understand this is all Krishna's energy. This is all meant to be engaged in Krishna's service. So all this happens just by turning on that one light switch. And Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada explains, that one light switch by which everything gets revealed to the living entities is devotional service. When we take to the process of bhakti yoga, when we turn on the switch of bhakti, Prabhupada explains, just by that turning on that one switch, everything gets illuminated, one gets complete knowledge, all of one's ignorance is dissipated, and one can understand who he is, who Krishna is, and how everything in this world is supposed to be engaged in his service. Okay, we'll go to the next verse, text 8. One who is enlightened in self-realization, although living within the material body, sees himself as transcendental to the body. Just as one who has risen from a dream gives up identification with the dream body. A foolish person, however, although not identical with his material body, but transcendental to it, thinks himself to be situated in the body. Just as one who is dreaming sees himself as situated in an imaginary body. Okay, so this verse, in the purport, the devotees or disciples of Prabhupada are explaining that this verse and the next 9 verses, so text 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So from text 8 to text 17, the Krishna is going to describe the different symptoms of the liberated soul and conditioned soul. So he's going to give the comparison of these, of the Nitya Baddhas and Nitya Siddhas. So in this verse, Krishna is explaining that just like, although living entity within the material body sees himself transcendent to the body, just as one has risen from a dream, gives up identification with the dream body. So just like when we're in a dream, we identify with some illusory body, but when we wake up, immediately we forget that illusory conception and one comes back to real life. So in the same way, the Nitya Siddhas, they don't identify themselves with this material body. Instead, they always see themselves as Krishna's servants. And not identifying oneself with their material body doesn't mean that they neglect their material body. It just means that they see this body as an instrument, as Krishna's service. So, not identifying with the material body doesn't mean that we don't take care of the body and we don't eat properly, we don't sleep properly. Of course, in some elevated cases of devotional service, like the 6 Goswamis, we will see that how they're completely aloof from the body. Like Raghunath Das Goswami, he is given as the, the epitome of vairagya or detachment from the material body. He used to eat very little, just a little bit every 3 days. He would maybe drink a little buttermilk. And every day he would have a fixed sadhana of chanting many hundreds of rounds. And every day he would offer obeisances many, many times to the Vaishnavas. So in this way he was very strict in terms of sadhana, and he was completely aloof from his body. He would take very little, subsist on very little food. So Goswamis or some very elevated devotees, we'll see how they're completely aloof from the material body. But we can't imitate that. Just like Krishna in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, he explains to Arjuna that, yes, speaking in terms of, technical details, Jnana Yoga is higher than Karma Yoga. But still, for you, Arjuna, on a practical level, for you, because your nature is that of a Kshatriya, Karma Yoga is most suitable for you. Although, yes, technically speaking, Jnana Yoga is higher than Karma Yoga in terms of hierarchy. Still, due to your nature, for your mindset and for where you are situated in terms of consciousness, for you, Karma Yoga is more practical. So therefore, Arjuna, you should engage in Karma Yoga, although Jnana Yoga is higher. So in the same way, although, yes, we're not this material body, and although, yes, that great elevated devotees like the Goswamis, they show by their example how one can be completely aloof from the material body by sleeping just 1-2 hours, by hardly eating anything for many days. Because we're not at that level, we can't imitate that level. We should act, as Krishna explains in Gita, we should act according to the level which we are. And because we're still in certain bodily conscious, so we need to take our body, we need to sleep properly, we need to eat properly. But we do that in relation to Krishna's service. We take care of our body nicely so we can engage this body in Krishna's service for his pleasure. We'll go to text 9. An enlightened person who is free from the contamination of material desire does not consider himself to be the performer of bodily activities. Rather, he knows that in all such activities, it is only the senses, born of the modes of nature, that are contacting sense objects, born of the same modes of nature. I'll read 10 also, because 9 and 10, they're related together. Text number 10. An intelligent person situated within the body, created by his previous fruitive activities, thinks, I am the performer of action. Bewildered by false ego, such a foolish person is therefore bound up by fruitive activities, which are in fact carried out by the modes of mature nature. Okay, so in these verses, text number 9 and 10, it's talking about the doer, who is actually the doer. And it's the same concept is discussed in the Gita. If you remember in the Prabhupada disciples, they're quoting the famous verse, Prakite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasa ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. That the soul, like similar verse, like we'll see that as we read Uddhava Gita, we'll see that whatever verses Krishna is speaking to Uddhava Gita, we'll find a similar verse present in the Gita which Krishna spoke to Arjuna. So this whole Uddhava Gita is just kind of like a more elaboration or expansion of what Krishna spoke to Arjuna. So a similar verse like we're seeing here, like in this verse we're reading now, it's saying, an unintelligent person situated within the body, created by his previous fruitive activity, thinks, I am the performer of action. But actually, bewildered by false ego, Such a foolish person is therefore bound up by fruitive activities, which are in fact carried out by the modes of mature nature. So it's pretty much exactly the same as the famous verse in 3rd chapter, Prakriti Kriya Manani. And when we were reading through Bhagavad Gita with Ghanshyam Prabhu, he was giving us he was explaining how in Vedic literatures, sometimes it is said that the soul, or us, the jiva, we're the doer. And sometimes, like in this verse, Prakriti Kriya Mani, it's explained that it's actually material nature, or it's the 3 modes of material nature that's the doer. And in other times, it's explained that actually Krishna is the doer. He is the supreme cause of all causes. He is Sarva Karana Karna. So which one of these 3 is actually the doer? Is it Krishna? Is it the jiva? Or is it the material nature? Because in different verses, in different contexts, one of these 3 different personalities they highlight as being the doer. And Prabhu was explaining that actually all 3 of them are the doers. Both the jiva is the doer, mature nature is the doer, and Krishna is also the doer. And how are they related? How do all 3 of them interact or function together? He was explaining nicely, Prabhu, he was saying that first, number 1, the jiva desires. Then after the jiva desires, then the super soul Krishna within the heart, he sanctions. And then thirdly, after Krishna sanctions, then material nature, she facilitates. And the example Prabhu was giving is that of a woodcutter. So there's a woodcutter and he wants to chop some wood. So there's the woodcutter himself, and then there's his arms, and then there's the axe itself. The actual object which is actually chopping the wood is the axe. And that axe is compared to material nature or Maya. And the arms which are using that axe to chop the wood, that's compared to the jiva. And the woodcutter himself, who sanctions his arms to cut the block of wood, that's compared to Krishna. So again, going back to analogy, the jiva desires, then Krishna as the super soul, he sanctions, and then mature nature facilitates. So just like the arms, they have a desire to do some physical activity. It feels good for the arm to do some physical activity like chopping some wood or doing some boxing or something this and that. So arms, they like to do some physical activity. The legs, they like to move. The eyes, they have desires to see. So in the same way, in this woodcutter's example, the arms, they have this desire to pick up the axe and chop the wood. But the arms can only pick up the axe and chop only if the woodcutter himself, using his brain, using his mind, he sanctions. Yeah, okay, let's go do it. Let's go and chop the wood. So essentially, out of these 3 doers, yes, Krishna is the topmost. The super soul is topmost, because only if super soul sanctions, then only can a particular action be done. But first, the jiva has to desire, then Krishna sanctions, and then mature nature, she facilitates. So in this way, we can see these 3 principles working together. The soul, Krishna, and mature nature. All 3 are actual doers. We'll go to text 11. An enlightened person fixed in detachment engages his body in lying down, sitting, walking, bathing, seeing, touching, smelling, eating, hearing, and so on, but is never entangled by such activities. Indeed, remaining as a witness to all bodily functions, he merely engages his bodily senses with their objects and does not become entangled like an unintelligent person. So in this verse, Krishna has explained that although externally it seems that a Nitya Siddha or a liberated soul, he's doing externally the same activities that a fallen conditioned soul or a Nitya Baddha is doing. He's also lying down, he's also sitting, he's also walking, he's also bathing, he's also seeing, touching, smelling. So the same activities that Nitya Baddhas are doing, the enlightened devotee or the liberated soul, he's also doing the same functions. But there's a difference. While he's doing these different physical activities, he's not entangled by such activities. How is it that he's not entangled? Because while he's doing all of these different activities, sitting, walking, bathing, seeing, touching, smelling, he's doing all these things in relation to Krishna's service. And because he's doing everything in relation to Krishna's service, without any tinge of mature desire, he's not contaminated, he doesn't get overcome by karma. And this way he's able to stay completely pure. And that's what Krishna will explain in text 14. In text 14, in the coming verse, Krishna explained that the way how the jiva, he's able to stay aloof, although externally engaging in mature affairs, the way he's able to stay aloof is because he has no mature desires. Because the mindset or the consciousness in which he is doing is not for his own pleasure, it's for the pleasure of Krishna, in that sense he is aloof. And in text 12 and 13, Krishna, he will give an analogy to explain how the pure devotee, although it seems that he is acting just like a karmi, how he is aloof. So we read that in text 12 and 13, Krishna will give an analogy to explain, to further explain or elaborate on this point. Although the sky or space is the resting place of everything, the sky does not mix with anything, nor is it entangled. Similarly, the sun is not at all attached to the water in which it is reflected within innumerable reservoirs, and the mighty wind blowing everywhere is not affected by the innumerable aromas and atmospheres through which it passes. In the same way, a self-realized soul is completely detached from the material body and the material world around it. He is like a person who has awakened and arisen from a dream. With expert vision sharpened by detachment, the self-realized soul cuts all doubts to pieces through knowledge of the self and completely withdraws his consciousness from the expansion of material variety. So there's three analogies Krishna gives in this verse to help us understand how the liberated soul is completely aloof from the material world. Firstly, Krishna says, he gives the example of the sky. How everything is situated in the sky, the clouds, the birds, wind, so many different things are situated in the sky. But at the same time, the sky is uncontaminated, the sky doesn't mix with anything. And another example Krishna gives is the sun. The sun is reflected in different reservoirs of water or in different liquids. But the sun is completely detached from its reflection in different reservoirs. And the third example Krishna gives is that of the mighty wind. The wind, it blows through different areas, and in different areas there are different aromas, some nice aromas or bad smelling aromas and different atmospheres. But again, the wind, it doesn't acquire these different qualities. Sometimes we'll go through a bad atmosphere, sometimes a very nice pleasing atmosphere through some rose bushes, but the wind is detached. It doesn't acquire or take up these qualities. So in the same way, Krishna is explaining that a self-realized soul, he is completely detached from the material body and the material world around it. And in the next verse, Krishna will explain that the liberated soul, he is able to be detached like this is due to be having no material desire. So this is in text 14, Krishna explains, a person is considered to be completely liberated from the gross and subtle material bodies when all the functions of his vital energy, senses, mind and intelligence are performed without material desire. So that's the key Krishna is explaining. The liberated soul, he's doing all these things without material desire, that's why he is uncontaminated. Such a person, although situated within the body, is not entangled. Go to text 15. Sometimes for no apparent reason, one's body is attacked by cruel people or violent animals. At other times and in other places, one will suddenly be offered great respect or worship. One who becomes neither angry when attacked, nor satisfied when worshipped is actually intelligent. So we see many similar verses like this in Bhagavad Gita, how a Sthita Dhir Muni or a self-realized soul, he is unaffected by the dualities of this material world. He is unaffected by praise or criticism, by the weather, and so on and so forth. In this verse, Krishna is explaining that the one symptom of the liberated soul is that when he is attacked by cruel people or violent animals, either physically or mentally or verbally, he doesn't become angry at them. The general tendency of conditioned soul is when someone either attacks us verbally or mentally or physically, then we want to retaliate, we feel very offended and we want to say something bad or do something bad to them. But the liberated soul is detached and he doesn't become angry at them. And on the other hand, when the liberated soul, he is worshipped, glorified and praised, Krishna is explaining that he doesn't take that praise to heart and he doesn't feel very good inside himself. He doesn't feel that satisfied, oh yes, people are finally recognizing my glory. Finally, someone is noticing my worth. So he doesn't feel satisfied in that respect. And this point is, we'll say, highlighted by so many different devotees in the Shastras. For example, Mahaprabhu, he himself he taught these principles. It's explained by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. There's one nice prayer. He says that Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga Siksastavam Eka Purusha Purana Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari Kripam Bodhir Yastam Aham Prapajya. That Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is Krishna himself, and he's taken this golden form as Mahaprabhu, and he's descended to his world. Why? To teach us by his own practical example how to do three things. By his own practical example, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is explaining, Mahaprabhu is teaching us Vairagya, detachment, Vidya, he is teaching us real transcendental knowledge, and Nija Bhakti Yoga, how to do devotional service to himself. So this aspect of detachment, being detachment from praise and criticism, Mahaprabhu in his pastimes, he himself displayed. For example, in Ancha Leela, there's the story of Ramachandra Puri. We know how Ramachandra Puri, he was the god brother of Mahaprabhu's spiritual master. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's spiritual master was Ishwara Puri, and Ishwara Puri's god brother was Ramachandra Puri. And this Ramachandra Puri, unlike Ishwara Puri, he was completely opposite. Ishwara Puri, he was so dedicated to the service of his spiritual master. It's given at the final time, moments of his spiritual master's life, he couldn't get out of his bed, and Ishwara Puri would serve him very menially. He would help his spiritual master pass stool, clean him up, dress him, take care of him, do all sorts of menial services as a very humble servant. Ramachandra Puri, on the other hand, he was complete opposite. He was very proud of his learning, and due to bad association with other Mayavadis and non-devotees, Ramachandra Puri's mindset was completely contaminated. So much so, at the final moments of Ishwara Puri and Ramachandra Puri's spiritual master, when he was passing away and when he was reciting different verses in ecstasy and when he was crying in separation from Krishna, at that time Ramachandra Puri comes and he has the audacity to criticize his own spiritual master, saying that, at this final moment of death, you should be absorbed in Brahman, and being absorbed in the Supreme Impersonal Brahman, you should be experiencing great Brahmananda, you should be experiencing great happiness. Why is it that you're crying? This isn't what we should do when we die. When we're about to leave this body, you should be in Samadhi in Brahman and you should feel the bliss of Brahman. Why is it that you're crying, chanting Krishna, Krishna, chanting these, all these devotional songs or devotional prayers at the time of death? This isn't proper. So in this way, he has the audacity to criticize his own spiritual master. So in this way, he offends his spiritual master, and his spiritual master rejects him and says, just get out of here, I don't want to see your face. And in this way, Ramachandra Puri's fall down starts. Later on, while Mahaprabhu is in Puri, it's explained in CC, that this Ramachandra Puri, he comes, and he immediately starts finding fault with Mahaprabhu and starts criticizing him. Due to his offenses committed to his spiritual master, it's said that Ramachandra Puri, he just becomes completely materialistic and he becomes a completely offensive personality. And he starts finding or seeing faults and starts criticizing Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri, saying that this sannyasi, he eats too much, duty of a sannyasi is that he should be eating very little, he shouldn't eat so much. And look at this sannyasi, Mahaprabhu, every day he's going to different householder's house, eating so much prasadam, this isn't proper. And when Mahaprabhu hears this criticism, again, he doesn't become angry that, who is this person, Ramachandra Puri, criticizing me? I'm just eating whatever my devotees give to me in love. And so Mahaprabhu, he doesn't defend himself, he doesn't criticize Ramachandra Puri in return, he doesn't do all of these things that we would probably do. But instead, Mahaprabhu, what was his response? He responds by saying, actually he has a point. Yes, I am eating too much. So Mahaprabhu, he explains to his devotees that Ramachandra Puri, he's a very great senior devotee. He is the god brother of my spiritual master. So in that sense, I consider Ramachandra Puri to be like my own guru, like my own spiritual master. Therefore, whatever he instructs, I should follow. And out of love, Ramachandra Puri, he is instructing me in this way, so I should follow. Yes, he has a point. A sannyasi shouldn't eat too much. And yes, I'm eating too much, I should reduce my eating. In this way, Mahaprabhu, he completely, drastically reduces his intake of prasad. And when the devotees, they see this, they can't tolerate it. Mahaprabhu eating very little prasad every day. And they go and beg Mahaprabhu that please, give up There's, why you listen to Ramachandra Puri, that person, he's a crazy person, he's just envious, he's just a fault finder. In this way, devotees, they were begging Mahaprabhu to resume his eating, but Mahaprabhu still said, no, Ramachandra Puri, he's senior to me, I should follow what he says. So in this way, Mahaprabhu, he's showing us the ideal example of a devotee, how a devotee should be very humble, meek and humble. And then later on, there's one instance where Mahaprabhu is sitting in his room, and Ramachandra Puri comes. And when Ramachandra Puri comes, he sees there's some ants in the corner of the room. And immediately Ramachandra Puri, he points at those ants and says, just see, do you see? There's some ants in the corner of the room. And the devotees, they're like, okay, there's ants, but what's the big deal? You've never seen ants before? And then Ramachandra Puri, he continues. You know what ants means? Ants means that there's been a lot of sweets in this room. Ants only come when there's sugar and sweets. So this means, because there's ants in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's room, this means that this sannyasi, or this so-called sannyasi who's acting very renounced, has secretly been eating lots and lots of sweets. And because he's been secretly eating lots and lots of sweets, that's why there's so many ants in his room. So in this way, again, this is one example of how Ramachandra Puri used to criticize Mahaprabhu. Now again, if someone did something like that to us, we would just lose it. When someone forcefully criticizes like that to us, we would just completely lose it and just, blast back at that person or do something. But Mahaprabhu, he just humbly was showing them the ideal example of devotee, was just humbly tolerating. But the same tolerance, when criticism comes, the Shastra explained, shouldn't be shown when another Vaishnava or when Krishna, he himself is being criticized. It's explained, for ourselves, if any criticism comes towards us, then we become detached and we just remain humble. We don't try and retaliate, and we just accept it as mercy. But when it comes to other devotees and Krishna being criticized, then it's explained, one shouldn't tolerate and one should act like fire. One should do something about it. Either one should stop that criticism from happening by defeating that offender in argument, or if one can't defeat that offender in argument, then one should leave that place, close his ears and run away from that place. Otherwise, by hearing that offensive criticism of another Vaishnava, one will accumulate sins, one will go down in the spiritual life. That's why we see in the 4th canto of Bhagavatam that when Daksha, he was criticizing Lord Shiva, speaking so many bad things about Lord Shiva, at that time it's mentioned that the Brahmanas in the assembly, they couldn't tolerate hearing the blasphemy of Lord Shiva, the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna. And at the same time, they couldn't do anything, they couldn't kill Daksha. So the Shastras give, there's two options. Either if some criticism of Vaishnava or Krishna is happening, either you should cut the tongue of that person, or if you can't cut their tongue, then you should run away from that place. So these Brahmanas are given an example in 4th canto, when Daksha was criticizing Lord Shiva. They couldn't kill Daksha, so these Brahmanas, they just closed their ears and they just ran away from that place because they couldn't tolerate hearing blasphemy of Lord Shiva. So again, when criticism comes towards us, we just be very humble, as Mahaprabhu is showing, and we don't take it so seriously. We see that, okay, there might be some truth in whatever criticism is coming to us. Maybe there is some truth, and like this we contemplate within ourselves. And we don't get so agitated, and we don't become angry, as this verse is saying. But when it comes to other devotees and Krishna being criticized, we should do something about it. We should either defend that particular Vaishnava. If some particular Vaishnava is unfairly being criticized, then we should, and we're hearing that happening, then we should speak up and defend that particular Vaishnava. That actually, no, this Vaishnava is really nice Vaishnava. You're misunderstanding this Vaishnava. Actually, this devotee is very sincere. You don't know for how many years this devotee has been serving. He's very nice, he's doing this, he's done this, he's done that. In this way, we should defend that particular Vaishnava when we hear some unfair criticism. Same way, when Krishna is being criticized, one should do something about it. But if one doesn't have the ability to defend, then it's explained, the Shastras give the injunction that one should immediately run away from that place without hearing the blasphemy of the Lord or blasphemy of the Lord's devotees. Now the other aspect of this verse is that when one becomes, so one aspect is when we become criticized, we don't become angry. The other aspect is that when we get praised or glorified or worshipped, we don't take it too seriously, we don't start feeling good about ourselves, we don't start feeling very satisfied at heart. His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, he explains that whenever any praise and glorification comes to us, we should take it as someone is throwing a hot blazing coal into our hands. So just like if someone has a hot blazing coal and they throw it towards us, then we immediately become scared that if we hold this hot coal and embrace it to our hearts, we'll immediately get burnt, we'll cause harm to ourselves. So in the same way, Radha Maharaj explains that praise and glorification or worship, name and fame which comes towards us, directed towards us, is actually very dangerous, is actually very detrimental to our spiritual lives. Because if we hold it to our hearts, if we take those praise or glorification to our heart, then we'll get overcome by false pride, and being overcome by false pride will go down in our spiritual life. And in the Shastras we see so many crazy examples of how one can become completely mad when one gets overcome by false pride. For example, Indra, he is a classical example, being overcome by false pride. He even goes to the extent of trying to murder all the Vrajvasis by throwing so much torrential rain in Vrindavan. He was trying to literally annihilate not just Krishna but all the Vrajvasis. So to that extent one can go when one gets completely blinded or maddened by pride. Another example, in 9th canto we see how another example of pride given is of Soma. In 9th canto Bhagavatam it's explained that Soma, being so much proud of his wealth, opulence, of his prowess, he has the audacity to kidnap the wife of his own spiritual master Brihaspati, which is completely unthinkable, you going and kidnapping your spiritual master's wife. But again, Bhagavatam explains that because Soma was so much maddened by pride in his opulence and wealth and his good looks, that he goes up and does this. So this is the effect that happens if we take praise and glorification to our heart. Radhanath Maharaj explains. It's just like someone throwing a red hot coal into our hands, and if we hold that red hot coal to our hearts or in our hands, we'll just be burning ourselves, we'll be just burning our spiritual lives. So then what should one do? He explains, as soon as, like in school we had this game called hot potato. We'll have a ball or something, a tennis ball, and the game is that everyone will throw the ball to each other in the room, and as soon as you get the ball is supposed to be like a hot potato. You have to immediately throw it to another person. You can't just hold it and wait. You get the ball, you immediately throw it to one person to another person. So in the same way, Radhanath Maharaj explains that when this hot coal of glorification comes towards us, instead of holding in a hand, we should immediately pass that hot coal to someone else, which means we should pass over that glorification to either our mentor, our spiritual master, or to Krishna, saying, oh, actually it's only by Krishna's mercy, it's only by Guru's mercy, it's only by Krishna's mercy that I'm able to do this. In this way, we'll be saved from the pitfall of taking glorification to heart and becoming overcome by false pride and glorification. So we go to text 16. A saintly person sees with equal vision and therefore is not affected by that which is materially good or bad. Indeed, although he observes others performing good and bad work and speaking properly and improperly, the sage does not praise or criticize anyone. So in this verse, Krishna is saying that the saintly devotee, he sees others engaging in good work and bad work. But when he's seeing someone engage in good work, he doesn't praise them. And when he's seeing someone engaged in bad work, he doesn't criticize them. And in what context is this being said? This is being said in the context of materially good or bad. So I'll read the translation again. A saintly sage sees with equal vision and therefore is not affected by that which is materially good or bad. Indeed, although he observes others performing good and bad work and speaking properly and improperly, the sage neither praises or criticizes anyone. So this is in relation to mature activities. So in terms of mature activities, like there's a famous verse in CC which explains that so-called good and bad in the material context are all the same. Just like in terms of politics or what government is ruling, a saintly sage is aloof from all these material aspects, and he doesn't say, oh, okay, this minister is very good or that minister is not so good. He doesn't get so much involved in material affairs, politics, sports, this thing or that thing. So when Krishna is saying that the sage, he doesn't praise or criticize, this is in relation to material affairs. In terms of ordinary material affairs, he thinks, what's the point? Whether this person becomes the prime minister or that person becomes the prime minister, they're all non-devotees. Whichever one wins the election, it will still be the same thing. So he doesn't bother wasting his time and energy criticizing that person or that person. So when it's saying that he doesn't praise or criticize, that's in relation to mature dealings. But in Vaishnava circles, a devotee does offer praise. When a devotee, he sees another Vaishnava engaged in service, very sincerely doing very nice service, then naturally it's our duty to glorify that devotee and praise that devotee. And how does that help? It helps us, firstly, because when Shastras explain, when we observe another Vaishnava doing some nice service, and we glorify them and we appreciate them, then as a result of that, 1/6 of whatever spiritual credit that particular Vaishnava is accruing by his nice service, we'll also acquire ourselves. And my Guru Maharaj, he also mentions that the super soul within our heart, when he observes us taking pleasure in seeing another devotee's advancement, the super soul being pleased with that, he makes transformation in our hearts and he also helps us acquire that same quality. Just like if we see another devotee singing very nicely or cooking very nicely, in our hearts, in our mind, we think, oh, this devotee is doing such nice cooking or nice singing. I wish I could also be like that. Then, number one, 1/6 of whatever spiritual credits that devotee is acquiring by his nice service, we get. And number two, the super soul seeing us appreciating another devotee's service, the super soul will start making transformations in heart to help us also become like that particular devotee. So in that way, when we praise another Vaishnava service, it's firstly benefiting ourselves. And it's also benefiting that person we're praising. How does it benefit the other person we're praising? Because when we offer some words of encouragement that Prabhu, today, you sang very nicely, that tune that you sang was very nice, or Prabhu, your mridanga playing today was very nice, or Prabhu, the prasad you cooked today for lunch was very nice, the dal was very nice, the sabji was very nice. How does it help that person we're praising? It inspires him to continue on in the service. Because that person feels, okay, so if these Vaishnavas, they're pleased with how I did today, let me continue engaging in service with more sincerity, because by my activities, other Vaishnavas are pleased. So in this way, that person we're praising, they get more inspired. Their enthusiasm, their inspiration, and their determination to continue on devotional service further increases. In this way, they also get more inspired to do more devotional service. So in this way, when we offer praise to other Vaishnavas, firstly, we benefit ourselves. Secondly, we benefit that Vaishnava whom we're glorifying. And thirdly, we also benefit Krishna. How do we benefit Krishna? Because when we're praising another devotee, that devotee, he becomes inspired to do more service. And in this way, Krishna gets more service, and this way, Krishna gets more pleasure. So in this way, the Shastras explain that it is our duty that when we see another Vaishnava doing some nice service, we should appreciate that and we should offer praise. Not just mentally, but verbally offer praise. In this way, we make spiritual advancement. The devotee we are praising, they make spiritual advancement. And Krishna, he also benefits because service, there's more service to Krishna's lotus feet. And in terms of criticizing, so obviously in mature dealings, a devotee, he doesn't take part in praising or criticizing politicians, cricketers, this person, that person. But amongst Vaishnava circles, he praises. And in terms of criticism, generally speaking, he stays away. It's explained in Vaishnava etiquette that only if we're formally given the charge to take care of some devotees, we put in some role of leadership or mentorship, then it's our duty that if we see our subordinates doing some mistake, then it's our duty to correct them. Just like it's the parents' duty to take care of the children, and taking care of the children means to show them love and affection, but also if they see the children doing something wrong, then it's the duty of the parents to stop the children and correct them. And the parents to do that out of love. So in the same way, Vaishnavas, they also use criticism or correction, but only for those who they have a strong relationship, only for those who are under them formally as their mentees, and if they're formally put in a position of leadership, then they take up that role to correct or chastise, but it's all done, again, in the mood of as a loving parent would do out of love and affection. In that mood, when Vaishnavas are criticizing or offering some correction, it's done in that mood, not to put them down, but as a means to help that devotee, not go off the path, but go closer to Krishna. Okay, that brings us to text 17, and with this we'll stop. So this last verse, text 17, concludes this section. So as we were explaining before, from texts 8 to 17, Krishna is talking about the different symptoms of the liberated person. For example, we saw the liberated person, although externally he's engaging with the material world by eating, sleeping, seeing, touching, smelling, he is completely aloof. Just like the wind is passing through different environments, the wind is aloof. Just like the sun is being reflected in different reservoirs of water, the sun is aloof. In the same way, the liberated soul, although externally performing many different activities, is completely aloof. And we were discussing how the liberated soul is aloof from all dualities, like being praised or being criticized. And that brings us to the last text, text 17. With this, Krishna will conclude the different qualities or the symptoms of a liberated sage by which we can see how one is, or perceive who is actually a liberated person. Okay, so text 17, for the purpose of maintaining his body, a liberated sage should not act, speak, or contemplate in terms of material good or bad. Rather, he should be detached in all material circumstances, and taking pleasure in self-realization, he should wander about engaged in this liberated lifestyle, appearing like a retarded person to outsiders. Okay, so in this final verse of this section, Krishna is saying, the last line he's saying that he should wander about, engaged in this liberated lifestyle, being completely detached from everything, appearing just like a madman or appearing like a retarded person to outsiders. So this particular instruction of Krishna is there for some persons, but not towards us. For example, I was listening to one lecture by my Guru Maharaj in regard to Jada Bharat. And Jada Bharat, he's practically carrying out this instruction of appearing like a complete madman to men in general, or to people in general. It's explained that Jada Bharat, he could remember his past lives, that he could understand, okay, previously I fell down due to being attached to a deer, and this time he didn't want to take any chances, and he understands the Shastras, the dangers of bad association. Like in Shastras, many examples of great persons, like even there's the example of Krishna's son, Bhaumasura. Bhaumasura took birth from Krishna and Mother Earth. So although Bhaumasura, it's explained in Bhagavatam, he was the son of Krishna and Mother Earth, still due to bad association, he was sidetracked. Due to association with Narakasura and other demons, he was sidetracked. So this is the pitfall of bad association. So Jada Bharat, he knew about the power of Maya, the power of bad association. So to protect himself from Maya, what Jada Bharat thought he'll do is that he'll act like a completely retarded person, he'll act like a complete madman. So in this way, everyone will stay aloof from himself. So in this way, Jada Bharat, he used to do completely the opposite of what his parents used to ask him to do. His dad would say, okay, this is how you do achaman, he'll do the complete opposite. His dad would say, okay, after you go to the toilet past 2, you should wash your hands, you should clean yourself like this, and he'll do the opposite. So in this way, he would never clean himself, he would even just walk naked in the streets. And he would wear a Brahmin thread, but his Brahmin thread was completely black because he never took shower or bath. And he just acted like a complete madman. People would throw stones at him, criticize him, and he was just completely aloof. So this is an example of what this verse is saying, that the liberated sage, he's supposed to be completely aloof to the whole external world, and he should act like a completely retarded person. And what's the purpose of this? In this way he can stay aloof from bad association. He won't get affected by negative sangha. But my Guru Maharaj is explaining that this particular lifestyle or behavior of a liberated sage or a soul is there for certain persons. For Jada Bharat's case, this was his service to Krishna. For his particular service to Krishna was to act like this. But this isn't the service that's required of us. This isn't the service that our spiritual masters want of us. For us, Mahaprabhu has instructed, Yare Deko, Tareko Krishna Upadesa. So for us, our Guru Maharaj, our spiritual masters, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the 6 Goswamis, the service they want from us is to take this message of Krishna consciousness and to share it with others, to spread it all over the world. So in certain souls' case, certain liberated souls' case, Krishna, he wants them to act like this, so they act like this. But in our case, my Guru Maharaj is explaining that for us, this isn't the instruction given to us. For us, our instruction is to engage everything in Krishna's service and to spread this movement all around the world. Okay, so with this we conclude this section. So next week we'll continue on with this chapter. Is there any questions or comments before we finish? Okay, we'll stop here. Gantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Jaguru Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Hari Hari Bol.